Today we're going to talk about the simple sentence. Once you understand the simple sentence, then it's much easier to understand the compound sentence, because the compound sentence is just the adding together of simple sentences. So the same error that can happen in the simple sentence can also happen in the compound sentence. That error is called a fragment. So I'm going to talk quickly about that. I will be referring to exercises from the College English Workbook and Reader with a theme on disability. You may have the edition that looks like this, or you may have the edition that looks upside down like that. That's actually an instructor's edition, but you know what I mean. The cover might look like that. Okay, so a simple sentence is comprised of two things: a subject and a verb. Hopefully you've done the chapter in the workbook that reviews parts of speech. I know that seems very sophomoric perhaps, especially for you college students. We did parts of speech when we were kids, but you really need to understand what a noun is and what a verb is. And indeed, some people do have trouble with these things, by the way. If you're having trouble with these things, don't think it's weird, because it's not. A lot of people actually still do have trouble with these things. Unless you do what I do for a living and you do this every day, then you forget. Okay, so a noun, there are different types of nouns. There's a common noun: boy, girl, table, teacher, house, dog. Then there are proper nouns. Proper nouns name common nouns. So they're capitalized. So instead of saying cat, I would say, my three cats here, Samson, that's a proper noun, capitalized. It names the cat. Delilah, capitalized. And Bagheera. Yep, I'm one of those cat ladies. Instead of saying girl, I would say Sarah or Maria. That's a proper noun. Then we also have pronouns, and pronouns replace all the kinds of nouns, proper and common, with he, she, it, etc. Okay, so it's important to understand nouns, because a simple sentence is comprised of a subject and a verb, and a subject is always a noun. Okay, so let's look at this really quickly. So what we have here is a subject plus a verb, right? And the key, the third element, is that together the subject and the verb can stand on its own. So let's keep it really simple. We'll start with an article, which again is a part of speech, the, right? The cat sat at the door. Okay? So what you always want to do first is find the verb. Never forget to find the verb first. Other people will tell you, oh, the subject is just kind of what the sentence is about. And that's not true, because even if you know that the subject is a noun, and let's say I show you this sentence, let me make it longer. The cat sat at the door watching the birds and meowing at the rabbits. Okay, this is actually still a simple sentence, and I'm going to show you how. Now, even if you knew that the subject was always a noun, and you just walked in off the street, you didn't have the workbook, you don't really remember, and people say, oh, the subject of the sentence is whatever the sentence is about. Well, you might look at this sentence: the cat sat at the door watching the birds and meowing at the rabbits. And you might think, well, it's kind of about rabbits, and rabbits is a noun. It's plural, right? It's more than one. Or you might think, what about the birds? The birds is plural, a common noun, and it's kind of about the birds, right? Or what's our other noun here? Door. Maybe the sentence is about the door. That's a noun. So this is the problem that people will run into when these textbooks tell you that the subject is what the sentence is about. No, the subject is the noun that is enacting the verb. Always, always, always. So how you find it without fault, without error, is to find the verb first. And then you say who or what is doing, is enacting this verb. So let me show you. In our sentence here, even though it's so much longer, it's still a simple sentence, and there's actually still only one subject and one verb here. Our verb is sat. It is the past tense of to sit. It is conjugated. That's why we don't think that watching is a verb, because watching is an ing. Ing are never main verbs. They're not active. So for example, you wouldn't, If someone said, well, what are you doing tonight? You wouldn't say, I studying, right? What are you doing in the kitchen? I cooking. It's not a verb. You would say, I am studying. Am is the verb. Or I am cooking. Or I will be cooking. Will be is the verb there. You see? So already looking at this sentence and looking for the verb, we can get rid of watching, that's not one, and meowing is not one. Now, if you've done the exercise in the workbook that helps you to identify prepositional phrases, it's always good to identify prepositional phrases because you can mentally delete them from the sentence. That doesn't mean they're not important. They are. They're helpful. But you will never have the subject or the verb in a prepositional phrase. Okay? That's why it's called a phrase. Phrases don't have subjects and verbs. Clauses, on the other hand, like the simple sentence, which is also called the independent clause, clauses have subjects and verbs. So you have the independent clause, you have the dependent clause, and you have relative clauses as well. All types of clauses will always have subjects and verbs. The clause itself may just be able to stand on its own, not stand on its own, or fit into the middle of a sentence and thus give us more information about the subject. That's a relative clause. So looking back at our sentence right here, we have the cat sat at the door watching the birds and meowing at the rabbits. You can mentally get rid of at the rabbits because that's a prepositional phrase. You can mentally get rid of the INGs, that and that. You can get rid of at the door as well because that's a prepositional phrase. All you're really left with here, if it helps you, is the cat sat. Okay. Even without getting rid of all of those things, hopefully you would be able to find that the verb is sat. And then what you say to yourself, and you can walk yourself through every single noun in this sentence. You can say to yourself, okay, I'm going to try to find the subject. So who or what sat at the door watching the birds and meowing at the rabbits? Did rabbits sat at the door watching the birds? No. Did birds sat at the door watching the birds? No. The cat sat at the door watching the birds and meowing at the rabbits. Therefore, we now know that the cat is the subject and sat is the verb. And it can stand on its own, which makes it an independent clause because it can stand on its own, just like when you move away from your parents and you are independent, right? You cannot be claimed as a dependent on their taxes because you don't rely on them. The independent clause does not rely on more information. Now, just as an example, I'll turn it into a dependent clause so that you understand the difference between independent and dependent. If I added a subordinating conjunction, such as when, or because, or although. When the cat sat at the door watching the birds and meowing at the rabbits, doesn't that bother you? It's like a lean forward clause because you don't know what's coming next. It needs to be finished. It's a dependent clause. We only use dependent clauses in complex sentences, which I'll talk about in the video on complex sentences. But that's the difference. You can just say, the cat meowed, the doorbell rang, and that has subject and a verb that can stand on its own. If I say, when the doorbell rang, what happened? She screamed, or although I went to work today, what? You didn't get paid? You got fired? What happened, right? Those are dependent clauses. They still have subjects and verbs, but they can't stand on their own. So hopefully that makes sense. So that's all a simple sentence is. Now, let's go through an exercise together. This is exercise 4 on the bottom of page 15 in the College English Workbook and Reader. It says, in the following sentences, please underline the verbs and place a V above them, because of course that stands for verb, and then underline the subjects and put an S over them. Okay, so number 1, we have Harriet Tubman was a great American activist. There's only one verb here. The verb is was. Then we say to ourselves, who or what was a great American activist? Was activist a good? No. Harriet Tubman is the subject. Number 2, was born is our whole verb. Who or what was born into slavery? She. She is a pronoun, right? It's the subject of this sentence. She was born. Number 3, escaped is our verb. She escaped from slavery. You could even get rid of from slavery because that is a prepositional phrase, same as number 2. Into slavery is a prep phrase, so you can just like mentally delete them. Oh, look, there's a little spider hanging right in front of me. So here we have escaped in number 3 is our verb. Who or what escaped? She is the subject. Okay, so there you have the simple sentence with a subject and a verb that can stand on its own. Now the only other thing, I'm going to try to escape this little spidey man. The only other thing, boop, there you go, to remember is that you can have more than one subject and more than one verb in a simple sentence, and it's still a simple sentence. Just because it has more than one subject and more than one verb doesn't turn it into a compound sentence. And we'll see the difference in the next video that I do on the compound sentence. But here's an example. So I could say, the cat and the dog ran and played and hissed and barked. Here we have ran is a verb, played is a verb, all past tense, hissed is a verb, and barked is a verb. We have 4 verbs in this sentence. It's still a simple sentence. Then we say who or what ran and played and hissed and barked. The cat is the subject, and so is the dog the subject. Oops. So we have 2 subjects and 4 verbs. Okay, so let's look at, on page 18 and 19, exercise 6 in the College English Workbook and Reader, you have independent clauses. In other words, it has a subject and a verb, but it can stand on its own. For that, we write IC, which of course is the acronym for independent clause, or dependent clauses, which again, because it's a clause, still has a subject and a verb, but it can't stand on its own. So you need to make sure that a simple sentence is an independent clause. Here in number 1, always find the verb first. Was enslaved. Who or what was enslaved? Harriet Tubman is the subject. So we know we're looking at a clause, but it begins with although, which you can hear, subordinates the clause into a dependent clause. So although Harriet Tubman was enslaved, what? We don't know. That's a dependent clause. So you can basically tell any of those that begin with subordinating conjunctions because, although, as well. But, by the way, is not a subordinating conjunction. The 7 coordinating conjunctions you can start a simple sentence with, and it doesn't make it a dependent clause. So you can say, and they lived happily ever after. Remember, there are 7 coordinating conjunctions that we remember with the acronym FANBOYS. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. You can start a simple sentence with those, okay? It's still independent. And they lived happily ever after. For, they were happily in love. But she had a secret. So he snuck around. You see, anyways, you can start with the 7 coordinating conjunctions. So if you're looking at exercise 6 on page 18 and 19, number 6 begins with but he thought nothing of it. And that's perfect. That's an independent clause. It can stand on its own. Same with number 9. And she walked into freedom. Right? That's a perfect simple sentence. It can stand on its own. Walked is your verb. She is your subject. And you can start with and. It doesn't leave you hanging in any way. By the way, this whole story is true in exercise 6. That's exactly what Harriet Tubman did. She just started singing a song as the master was on his horse going right past her in broad daylight. And she just started singing, and he thought, what is she doing? Well, she can't be up to anything because she's not nervous. She just sang a song, opened the gate, walked out the gate singing, and just kept walking. So when people used to say, oh, she escaped, she ran away from slavery or what have you, she would say, no, I didn't, I walked. Okay, one other thing about the simple sentence is the main error that can happen is called a fragment. Okay, so this is what can happen in a simple sentence, i.e. an independent clause. Therefore, since compound sentences are just simple sentences brought together, instead of putting a period after each one, you can put a comma conjunction or a semicolon, which again I'll talk about in the next video on compound sentences. So you can have an error called a fragment in a simple sentence. And since compound sentences are only comprised of simple sentences, this error can happen in the compound sentence as well. It's called a fragment. A fragment can be four things. It's either missing a subject, missing a verb, missing both, or can't stand on its own. And I gave you examples of this. Let's see. In the fragments section of the workbook, which must be somewhere between pages 19 and 20. I don't have it in front of me, I just copied this up from it. Okay, so here's an example. If I write, right here, if I write Sojourner Truth, an activist, that's not a sentence because there's no verb. It's a fragment. If it said Sojourner Truth was an activist, now we have a verb and a subject and it can stand on its own. Okay, if I just write was an activist, here we have the verb, and then we say who or what was an activist? It doesn't say. The subject is missing. There, now it's a sentence. Sojourner Truth was an activist. If I write, although Sojourner Truth was an activist, we have the verb was, who or what was an adjective, was an activist, and Sojourner Truth is the subject. So we know we're looking at a clause. Now we have to say what kind of clause. Is it independent or dependent? Well, it begins with although, and so it is a dependent clause, which is a fragment because it can't stand on its own. So a fragment can never be a simple sentence, okay? Nor can it be on either side of a compound sentence, on either side of the semicolon, or on either side of the comma conjunction. You must have independent clauses on both sides of the compound sentence, both sides of either the comma conjunction or this semicolon. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Let me see. Are there any other? Yeah, no, there aren't any other exercises that I wanted to walk through with you. So hopefully that helps. Feel free to talk to each other in the comments, or if you are indeed my students, shoot me an email, ask me a question. I'm more than happy to help. And I hope that you're all doing well, and I'll see you soon.